Welcome to the Half Done Hobbyist. My name's Simon, and in this episode I'm going to introduce you to my new Blood Bowl team, the Reiksburg Royals, and I'm also going to show you how to paint them. So let's get started. I'm just going to show you how I paint my new Blood Bowl team, the Reiksburg Royals. I really liked how this scheme came out. I wasn't expecting it to be so successful, so I'm just starting off with some Kantor blue for all the armour, apart from the shoulder pads, and I'm going to lay it down in two really thin coats. It'll look a bit wishy-washy when it first goes on, but if you go over it another time, maybe two times, then it'll be completely solid. The aim for the base coating section is to have completely solid colours across the entire model. It won't look great, but once you put a wash on it and start highlighting it, then it'll all come together. So the Reiksburg Royals were founded in 2492, and they're an Imperial Nobility team. They're made up of lords and things like that. Lord Unterhand was jealous of the peasantry having so much fun playing Blood Bowl, so during a drunken gathering in his great hall, he asked for volunteers from all of his noble friends. They all thought it'd be a jolly good romp, so they all signed up. The team was lacking muscle, being outfought in their first few games, so Lord Unterhand drafted his ogre bodyguard, Derek. He did actually have a proper ogre name, but everyone just seems to call him Derek. They soon realised while it was great fun stomping the locals, all the games ended 0-0, albeit with a huge body count on the other side. They didn't really know the objective of the game after all, they just thought it would be fun to beat up the locals. You'd think they would have scored by accident at least. Something had to be done. It would be totally shameful not to win a league populated with the common folk of their town. Money was not an issue, so they sought out star player and all-round superstar Griff Oberwald, both to play for them and to coach them. Slowly but surely, under the tutelage of Griff, they got better. They walked the league with no one actually able to field a team against them in the playoffs, so they were awarded the Reiksburg Cup by default. They were ready to move up to a higher standard league, and that's where we joined them. I'm just blocking in all the cloth parts with Mephiston red. It's a really nice strong colour. So yet again, a couple of coats on this, just to make sure it's completely opaque. This little belt was really tricky. Don't try to do too much at once, just try to drag your brush across the centre of it, and then be very, very careful when you're painting the sides. These wee bits in the helmet really make it pop. They were actually really fun to paint. As you can see, I'm going for a red, white and blue scheme. So these ribbons at the back are red, white and blue. So just block them in with Mephiston red, Kantor blue, and the other one's Corax white, because we're going to put Apothecary white over the top of it. Now for the gloves we're using Wyldwood contrast paint, which is just, it's amazing, it's wonderful. So gloves, boots and the belt are all Wyldwood. It's got great coverage and it just looks really cool when it's dried. You hardly have to do anything to it to make it look really good. Just be very, very careful not to spill onto other bits. The main thing you have to remember about painting miniatures is, it's not about how careful you are at the start, it's how much you tidy up. This miniature looks really messy right up until near the end, and then with a wee bit of tidy up it starts to take shape, so don't panic if it's not looking great at the start. Just persevere, take the time to tidy up, which I never used to do, and just go for it. The trousers are Ushabti bone. I wanted a nice red and cream scheme. I first tried it on a sanguinary priest for the Blood Angels, and I've loved the colour combination ever since. At this point, try to be as careful as you can so you don't get any on the red. It's not a pain to clean up, but it's just, they're really big bits that you're aiming for, so it's quite easy to stay within the lines, he says as he paints over the red. Next thing, Retributor armour. I used to think you had to put a dark undercoat down for gold, but that is not the case. This is Wraithbone that Griff has been undercoated with, and gold and silver cover over it really easily. So we're doing the knee pads in Retributor Gold. There's a little wreath on his helmet. Just take your time, don't get any paint on the surrounding area. It's a really tiny area. Just be as careful as possible. The shoulder pads as well, the trim on them's gold. The hand guards are gold. The little star on the eagle as well. And of course most of his headdress is gold as well. And as you can see, it's starting to take shape. Still looks messy, but we'll fix that. I've done the little codpiece shield, gold as well. I was planning on doing something else with it, but I went a different way, and I'll tell you what that is later on. So just careful as possible, neat as you like. Now at this bit I put Wyldwood on the straps at the back. No, I didn't. At this bit I put Black Templar on the straps at the back, but it didn't really work, so later on I changed it over for Corvus Black, which really did work. The spikes are going in as Leadbelcher. The toe caps are Leadbelcher, and there's little buckles all over the place which you can paint Leadbelcher as well. As you can see, I got a big blob of Black Templar on the ball, so just ignore that for the moment. The guard on the helmet, that's Leadbelcher. So careful. Pick out everything that you can. If you're careful at this stage, then it does pay off later on. The little wings and the ribbon at the back, they're getting painted Corax white at the moment. And I tried Wyldwood on the ball, but I wasn't happy with it because it was the same colour as the glove. Painted Wyldwood on the wings as well, and then I put a second coat of Wyldwood on the top feathers just to darken them up while leaving the other ones lighter. Used Guilliman flesh for all the skin around them. It's actually a miracle. I've never been able to paint faces, but this is the closest I've got just by using Guilliman flesh. And then we put Apothecary white on all the Corax white bits. So as you can see, still looking messy, but we'll sort that. And this is the magic here. We're doing an Agrax Earthshade wash over the whole miniature apart from the blue bits. I wanted an aged look on the gold, so I went for Agrax rather than something like Reichland Fleshshade or Seraphim Sepia. I was going to do this pattern on the gold cod piece and make it red and cream, but instead I decided to take the difficult route and do it on his sash. So I'm just blocking in checks here. I've got really thin Ushabti bone on my brush, and as you can see, just vertical lines, evenly spaced. Try to run it over the contours of the cloth so that it looks realistic. Even if you mess up, doesn't matter, we can fix it when we're blocking in the checks later on. So work out how the cloth's bunched and try to draw in the lines properly, and then all you need to do is fill in the checks. It looks complex, but it's actually not. And then I decided on 3 squares across, which means we're doing 2 thin lines of Ushabti bone down the sash. It'll be continued at the end of the sash where it pinches at his waist. Just be as neat as possible, and as you can see, it adds quite a lot, especially over the wash. We did an all-oil wash over the blue as well. Just colour in all the checks. Be very careful. It doesn't matter if it looks patchy at first. Just keep putting thin coats on until the squares look good. If you paint over into any of the red squares, don't worry, because we're going to tidy them up with Mephiston red later on. Like I say, I'm an average painter, but I was extremely happy with how these came out. And all it was taking time and going back and tidying up mistakes. So from a distance it actually looks really good at the moment. You get up close and it's a wee bit rougher, but we've still got a long way to go. So we'll sort it out. There you go, that's much better than the last stage. And more Ushabti bone, just make the squares a little bit clearer. Lovely. Try to angle your brush into the corners so that you're not, I don't know how to describe this, so you've not got an unnatural angle on the brush so that it catches the wrong bits of the squares. And keep your Ushabti bone out and do a quick layer over the trousers. Just very thin. It looks quite bright at the moment, but it'll dry in just fine. So just on the raised parts of this. It's much easier on the front than on the back because the folds are a lot more pronounced. So just catch all these folds with the Ushabti bone. As long as your paint's thin, it'll blend in really nicely. If you put on really thick paint, then it'll just look bad. There we go. So find all the Ushabti bone bits and tidy them up after their wash, because the Agrax wash does darken it down a lot. This is one of the areas I feel I could have improved. The backs of the legs were a wee bit messy. So here I'm just brightening up all the squares with Mephiston red. Just try to be as angular as possible, drag your brush down and just try to make as good a square as you can. You're going to be looking at it from a distance of about 2 feet on the tabletop, so it doesn't really matter. So what I'm doing here is just adding a little highlight of Evil Sunz Scarlet. Just thin paint, pick out all the edges, the same as you did with the Ushabti bone, and it'll start to take shape. It will really look like the light's catching the raised portions. Just use your judgment, paint bits, any bits you like. And this is the tricky bit, you have to be really careful here, because we're going to individually highlight every square on the sash. The positioning of the highlight doesn't really matter. Not for our purposes anyway. The only thing that matters is you get a highlight in there. If it's just a blank block, it doesn't look nearly as good, so just make sure you get a wee dot of Evil Sunz in there. Take your time and you'll be fine. And then just do a wee line on the helmet, on the red on the helmet, just to give it a nice wee highlight. Run it round all the ribbon. Just be bold, go for it. And we need to also highlight the shoulder pads, so just align all the way round the edge of the shoulder pads. Try to leave a wee bit of the Agrax in the recesses. picked up Wild Rider Red now, and what we're doing here is highlighting the highlights. You'll see the the Evil Sunz Scarlet highlight is fairly big compared to these, and then the Wild Rider Red highlight is just kind of in the middle of the Evil Sunz Scarlet, sorry. So you're highlighting the highlight. Going a bit heavy there, made a wee mistake, but we'll tidy that up later. And then same again, just try to highlight the highlight in each one of these squares. And it starts to take shape. Until we highlight the Ushabti bone in there, it won't look good. And with the belt, just pick out every single piece of rope. And yet again, just plonk your highlights on. They'll look bright, but if your paint's thin enough, then it'll dry out and go transparent. Round the ribbon, same thing, just layer your highlights on top of the previous ones. I truly believe anyone can do this. All it takes is time and patience. And we're taking Macragge blue to highlight the Kantor blue. Just do a line, doesn't matter how thick it is. Just do a line round all the armour plates. And for the body armour, because there's no real lines to it and it's quite curved, what I did was get really thin Macragge blue and layer it on in the centre of the armour plates. And when that dried, I went lighter, and then lighter, and then lighter again. And it seems to have worked. I'm really happy with the end results, which you'll see at the end of the video. Take your time with this bird as well, because these straps are really small, these middle ribbons. And another highlight on the trousers, this is Screaming Skull, just to pick out the highlights a little bit more. And as you can see, I'm going a lot lighter than I did with the Ushabti bone. Don't be afraid at all, you can always go over it and try again if you don't like the effect. So with the Reiksburg Royals, there is now a rule, players without heirs, which is what the rule's called. They are not allowed to play in the team because there was an infamous game against the Champions of Death. 4 lines were ended in one single game because 4 lords were killed by the Champions of Death. And now they play for the Champions of Death. So Lord Unterhand decided to make a proclamation that you could only play if you had someone to take on your line if you died, because Blood Bowl is just too dangerous. So with these squares, just block in a wee bit of Screaming Skull. And you'll see it's all coming together. And this is Altdorf Guard Blue, just a wee thin line, thinner than the Macragge Blue highlight, just around the edges, and we're putting that in the armour as well. And for the big curved armour panels, just do a slightly smaller highlight in the middle of the one you did before. Take your time, just catch everything you can. Doesn't matter if you miss bits. And this figure's just over an inch tall, so unless someone's got eagle eyes, they're not going to see. Or you could just play games with old people because they can't see anyway, like me. So he's beginning to look good now. I'm really happy with the way it's shaping up. I'm just feathering in these highlights really carefully. Just use brush control, be brave, tidy up mistakes, and you're golden. So remember to highlight the ribbons round the back as well, just in exactly the same way as the armour. This scheme very easily translates to all the other Imperial Nobility players and even the Ogre. What I've done with the other players is I've found a different area for the checks. So on a bodyguard, the checks are on the shield on his shoulder pauldron. The Ogre's got a disc on his chest, and that's got the checks on it for the Ogre. It looks really effective, even if I do say so myself. So for the leather, it's a little highlight of Gorthor brown, just in the raised areas, just to bring it out a wee bit more. But to be honest, for the leather, the Wyldwood would have done on its own, because the faded effect it gives at the edges works really, really nicely. And the bird, just tried to make it look like feathers, so I could have probably done more work on the bird, but I liked the way it looked anyway. So this ball is Rhinox hide, because I wanted it to be a different colour from the glove, and it's going to get a highlight of Mournfang brown just around the edges, just to differentiate it a little bit. I think it works. Let me know in the comments if you think it works or if I should change it. And it looks nice with the dark line down the middle as well. That was a very fine dry brush of Gorthor brown just across the wings. And with the lacing on the ball, I'm using Ulthuan grey and then Corax white on top of that, just for a tiny little highlight right in the middle of the lace. And on top of the Guilliman flesh, using Cadian fleshtone just to pick out the nose and the cheeks. And then we'll use Kislev flesh just for the end highlights. I picked out the eyes in Corax white and then did a Corvus black dot in the middle of them. Now this step's not essential because his helmet's quite hooded, but if you can do it then great, but if not, don't worry about it. Just be as careful as you can. This is the dot bit, the bit I hate. Yet again, when doing eyes I always find it useful to go back under them with a bit of skin colour, just to kind of take away the excess white that you might have deposited on the skin. For all the gold, I gave it a highlight of Sycorax bronze. It's really, really good at giving a nice shining gold effect. I would use Liberator, but I don't actually like the consistency of Liberator gold. The Sycorax bronze seems a lot nicer to use. Every bit of gold gets a wee highlight. I didn't take the highlights as far as Stormhost silver because in the past I haven't really got the effect I desired. It looks more just like silver rather than gold. So I just left it at Sycorax bronze because I liked the effect. So don't be afraid, don't think there's any number of highlights or shades that you need to apply to make it look good. Just do what you feel is right. So highlight the individual feathers on the helmet, just a wee line, and it looks like it's shining. Take your time. I think that must be the main thing to take away from this video. Time put in will give you better results. If you try to rush it or take any shortcuts, then that will be reflected in your final result. These knee pads came up really nicely with the Sycorax bronze highlight. Really shiny. I just highlighted the top of them, I didn't go down underneath. Not very much anyway. And the Stormhost highlight on the toe caps, although it was more like a layer, just with a wee bit of the Nuln Oil poking through. All the silver's shaded with Nuln Oil, by the way. So a wee bit of Stormhost on the face shield as well. If you take the effort to highlight everything, it doesn't matter how good your highlights are, as long as you take the effort, then it will show in the final result. For basing, I'm using Stirland Battlemire. I'm using the Battlemire over the mud because I'm trying to plug the holes in the base. What I wish I'd actually done was use solid bases and then just drill a hole for the ball, because there's a tiny little hole at the front of every base for Blood Bowl that you can plug the ball into when you're carrying it. But this was the next best thing. I actually stole this from a Games Workshop video where they did the same with Astrogranite. So work it around. I just use an old brush because I find it easier to push it into difficult to reach areas. And I just made sure that I blocked all the holes with the thick Stirland Battlemire. And then the rim gets a couple of coats of Steel Legion Drab. I used to use Baneblade Brown, but I think I ran out of that, so Steel Legion Drab it is. And then just thin down PVA glue, just stick a bit of water in it, slap it on the base, and we're going to use something called Glade Grass. My tub of Glade Grass is probably older than some people watching this video. It's been with me for a long time. Make sure you get full coverage on the base, but not any on the rim of it, because that can be problematic. So with this Glade Grass, I just crumble it over the base from up high, and it sticks to the PVA. The reason I used the flock and not just tufts is because I really wanted a full grass effect. I give it a little press down with my fingertip, just to push it into the glue, and then leave it to set for, I left it for about an hour. You have to be really careful if you take it off too early. If you try to knock it off too early, you get big clumps of flock and glue, and it's pretty disgusting, and it completely ruins the base. So be patient. Once it's dry, what you want to do is knock it against your table, get all the excess off, and it just looks like normal grass. I used my finger to rub round the rim just to make sure there was no grass stuck to the edge. The grass does get everywhere. You'll be finding it for weeks afterwards. And after that, just Corax white. Just draw it over the grass, because you'll have to clean it in between times because the grass sticks to your brush. And last but not least, transfers. Now there's two ways of doing this. If you've got microset and microsol, that's the way I would recommend, but it's very possible to do it with Lamian medium and any kind of gloss varnish. So I don't like submerging my transfers. I like wetting a bit of paper towel and then placing them on it for about 30 to 45 seconds till it's a wee bit soft, and then I paint the micro set onto the area that the transfer is going to be. If you're using gloss varnish, just paint the gloss varnish onto it. It gives it a nice surface for it to adhere to. And then get your transfer, slide it off with a slightly wet brush. I actually used a dirty brush for this and I really regret it because it's left little white flakes on the area. So once you've done that, you can get a wet brush and position it. Now the reason we use micro set is to stick it down, and the reason we use micro sol is to soften it so that it goes round curves and things like that. Micro sol, you just put it on, leave it to dry, and then you can still see the transfer film around the sides of it. All you need to do is put another coat on once it's dry. And finally, over the top of it, I'm putting tiny little scratches with Kantor blue to try to make it look worn in, the number. And I think it's pretty effective. If it's too shiny even after you've put the microsol on, then you can use Lamian medium to dull it down again. Here's the final result, and I have to say I'm delighted with it. I'm hoping I get to play with the Reiksburg Royals sometime soon, but I'm not sure that will happen. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my painting exploits, then like and subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts, let me know what could be improved, or if you took anything away from the video. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one.